On November 24th, 2021, defendant, an experienced pilot and skydiver, took off in his Taylor-Craft BL-65 airplane, which bore civil registration number November 29508, from Lompoc City Airport on a solo flight purportedly destined for Mammoth Lakes, California. However, defendant did not intend to reach that destination. Instead, pursuant to a scheme to gain notoriety and to make money, defendant planned to eject from his airplane during the flight and to video himself parachuting to the ground and his airplane as it descended and crashed. Prior to taking off, defendant mounted several video cameras on different parts of the aircraft and equipped himself with a parachute, video camera, and selfie stick. Approximately 35 minutes after taking off, while flying above the Los Padres National Forest near Santa Maria, California, defendant ejected from the airplane and videoed himself as he parachuted to the ground. Using the video camera mounted on a selfie stick and the video cameras mounted on the airplane, defendant was able to record the airplane as it crashed into a dry brush area within Los Padres National Forest. After parachuting to the ground, defendant hiked to the location of the wreck and recovered the data containing the video recordings of defendant's flight and the crash of the airplane. On November 26th, defendant informed the NTSB about the crash of his airplane. The NTSB launched an investigation the same day and interviewed defendant by telephone. During the interview, investigators told defendant, Jacobs, that defendant was responsible for preserving the wreckage and that the NTSB would need to see the wreckage. They emphasized to defendant that the focus was on identifying the location of the wreckage before he could give defendant further instructions. At the end of the interview, defendant agreed that he would determine the location of the crash and provide it to investigators. Defendant also agreed to provide investigators with videos of the accident. The FAA joined the investigation on November 29th, and on November 30th, they followed up with defendant and asked by email if defendant knew the longitude and latitude coordinates for the wreckage. Approximately an hour and a half later, defendant responded by email stating that he did not have the coordinates and was still trying to figure out exactly where the wreck was located. Subsequently, January 3rd, they again emailed him and asked, has the wreckage been recovered? If so, where is it? And he says, I am not aware of the plane location. Despite defendant's claim that he was not aware of the plane's wreckage location, defendant in fact had previously found the wreckage and had removed it from the crash site. In early December of 2021, defendant contacted a helicopter company in Paso Robles, California, and asked the owner of that company if he could help defendant retrieve his airplane. Thereafter, that person picked up defendant and defendant's friend in a helicopter at Rancho Sisquoc in Santa Maria, California. Defendant and his friend had each driven a pickup truck to the location. Defendant informed the helicopter pilot of the location of the wreckage, and they flew to the site of the wreckage. There, defendant, I think it's another defendant, secured the wreckage with straps, and the helicopter subsequently lifted the wreckage, carried it to the Rancho Sisquoc location, and it was loaded onto the trailer of defendant's pickup truck. Defendant, followed by his friend, then drove the wreckage to the Lompoc City Airport and unloaded the wreckage into a hangar used by defendant. Thereafter, defendant cut up and destroyed the airplane wreckage and over the course of a few days deposited the detached parts of the wrecked aircraft into trash receptacles at the airport and elsewhere. Defendant took apart the airplane and deposited its parts into trash receptacles with the intent to impede and obstruct federal authorities, namely the FAA and or NTSB, from being able to inspect the wreckage as part of their investigation into the November 24th, 2021 crash of defendant's airplane. Prior to defendant's flight, defendant had secured a sponsorship from a company that sold various products, including a wallet. Pursuant to that sponsorship deal, defendant would promote the company's wallet in the video to be posted by defendant on YouTube. Defendant intended to make money by promoting the wallet in the video that would depict, among other things, defendant parachuting from the airplane and the airplane descending and crashing. Consequently, on December 23rd, defendant uploaded a video on YouTube that contained a promotion of the wallet and the video of, among other things, defendant piloting the airplane, defendant exiting the airplane, parachuting to the ground, and the crash of the airplane. Prior to removing his airplane from the crash site and destroying it, defendant also made false statements to federal authorities to impede the NTSB's or FAA's investigation into the crash. For example, November 30th, defendant completed and submitted an NTSB pilot operator aircraft accident incident report. In that report, defendant falsely indicated that he had experienced a full loss of power approximately 35 minutes after taking off. In addition, on December 2nd, during a phone interview, defendant falsely stated that the airplane engine had quit, and because defendant could not identify any safe landing options, defendant parachuted out of the airplane. Defendant knowingly made these statements in order to conceal the fact that he purposefully abandoned his airplane in flight as part of his scheme to create a video to gain notoriety and make money. So, what is he pleading guilty to, or what does the beginning of this document say that we skipped? So, defendant's agreeing to give up the right to an indictment by grand jury and trial and all that. So, he's not going to contest the facts that he agrees to. He's going to abide by the agreement. He's going to appear for his court appearances. He's going to not commit any other crime. He's going to be truthful at all times, and he's going to pay the applicable special assessment money, I think. The attorney's office is also going to not contest the facts, is also going to agree, is also going to recommend a 2-level reduction in the sentencing guidelines and recommend an additional 1-level reduction if available. So he's going to get potentially 3 levels reduction in the sentencing guidelines. I don't know what that means for his sentence yet, but he'll serve less time if there's jail time, or the fine will be smaller if it's just a fine, or the probation will be shorter if it's just probation. The attorney's office will also recommend that defendant be sentenced to a term of imprisonment no higher than the low end of the applicable sentencing guidelines, provided that the offense level used by the court to determine the range is 15 or higher. The low end of the sentencing guidelines, without regard to the reductions, may be permissible through the substitution of community confinement or home detention. So he might be sentenced to home detention. Nature of the offense. Defendant understands that for defendant to be guilty of the crime charged, destruction and concealment of a tangible object with intent to obstruct a federal investigation, defendant knowingly altered, destroyed, concealed, or falsified a tangible object and acted with the intent to impede the investigation. So, the maximum sentence is 20 years imprisonment, 3 years supervised release, $250,000 or twice the gross gain, whichever is greater, and a mandatory special assessment of $100. Okay, so the special assessment part is $100, and I guess they fight with you over the rest of the money. Defendant understands that supervised release, okay, this is a period of time following imprisonment in which he will be supervised. Yes, he gets that. Defendant understands that by pleading guilty, he may be giving up valuable government benefits and valuable civic benefits, such as the right to vote, the right to possess a firearm, hold office, serve on a jury, or have a pilot's license, which I'm pretty sure was already taken away from him permanently, but still this sort of nails that coffin lid shut a little bit more. Defendant understands that conviction will subject defendant to various other collateral consequences, revocation of probation, parole, etc. if there was another charge, if he was on probation or parole from another case. And he may be removed or deported if he's not a U.S. citizen. Okay. Defendant admits that he is, in fact, guilty of the offense, and he agrees that the statement of facts below is sufficient to support the plea of guilty, etc. Okay, and we went over these facts. Now let's skip ahead to the sentencing. Sentencing guidelines are advisory only. The base level offense is this listed here, but he is facing a maximum sentence of 20 years. I don't know what the low end of that is, but I'm imagining that he's probably going to serve, I don't know, a year or 2 years in home confinement is what I would guess. Hey, it's Leonard from the editing room. So looking at the federal sentencing guidelines, that was 14 points plus 2 for the planning of the offense, and then a potentially minus 3 for his cooperation and plea agreement. So 14 plus 2 minus 3 puts him at a 13-point offense, and assuming there's no criminal history, remember it was going to be the low end of the sentencing guidelines, was the maximum level of sentencing. So 12 months would be his maximum sentence, if I've got this interpreted correctly. He did not hurt anyone. He specifically took steps to try not to hurt anyone. It was obviously a grab for money, but not worse than that. I'm not defending it, but these things do exist on a spectrum, and from petty theft to wanton rape and murder, he's somewhere in between. Yeah, don't breach the agreement, or they hit you with the book. Aren't airplanes super expensive? How lucrative was this wallet sponsorship? If I remember correctly, this was an airplane that was already deemed not flight worthy. So it was probably a decision to scrap the airplane. I don't know whether that was a good decision, but it was probably a decision to scrap the airplane instead of fix it up further. I recall something about him spending a bunch of time at the airport fixing up the airplane, getting it ready for this flight. That company sponsored many YouTubers. I suspect this was just another contract for them. Yeah, I don't think the wallet company, who I don't really care to say their name, especially if I get it wrong. I don't think the wallet company, knew that they were doing anything. Knew that he was going to do anything like this. It was very entertaining. We all knew that he would get in trouble eventually, or at least many of us thought that. I think the piloting community, the aviation community, of which I'm not a part, unless you consider drone operator aviation community. I've always wanted to be. I have 7 hours of actual behind the yoke time, but that was years ago. That was before 9/11. Anyway, the aviation community was outraged that this guy would misuse an aircraft and his piloting privileges like that. These sorts of incidents do have the potential to create new regulations and restrictions on pilots and aircraft. I'm thinking of the new regulations after the Twin Towers. Obviously, lots of new regulations were needed after that. Well, what if Trevor Jacobs had resulted in a giant forest fire, or dead vacationers or tourists, or what if his plane had gone off course, and even though he was in the middle of nowhere, it somehow stayed aloft and crashed into a town or something, and took out a building of people. I get that he was, far away, and that really couldn't have happened too much. But he's no longer in control of the aircraft, and he's done that intentionally. He's intentionally abandoned control of the aircraft, and that's like the number one thing. You need to be in control of your vehicle, control of your car, control of your bicycle, control of your aircraft. Somebody needs to be in control of it. You can't just abandon it for fun. Now, could he have done this like with permission? Yeah, I bet you if he had put together a proper plan, I bet you there is a way to do this properly. Like, think of like Adam Savage and Jamie Heineman and the Discovery Channel producing Mythbusters. I bet you they know who to contact and how to work out, like with the insurance companies and the producers and everything, and they have the money to back it up and all that. But can Trevor Jacob or can Leonard French just go do this? Probably not, because there's a lot of planning involved and there's a lot of people involved, and that means there's going to be money involved and safety and all that. And so, getting the insurance for it means you have to have all the things to satisfy the insurance company, a safety plan and people in place and all that. So I don't think Trevor Jacob could afford all that, nor could Leonard French, I don't think. But there was a way. There is a way to do it properly. If he really wanted to do it, there is a way to do it properly. Maybe if he really wanted to do it and he couldn't get permission otherwise, maybe he could find a way to do it in a country that doesn't have, the same level of regulation or something. I don't know. There's got to be somebody. Some country somewhere might let him crash a cheap plane for, very little money. I don't know. Something other than doing it under the regulations of the FAA and the U.S. government and all that, under the watchful eye of thousands of American pilots who are like, you can't do that. And then I loved the analyses. I loved watching, finding the fire extinguisher that I think was strapped to his leg. Why were there so many cameras? If, with this conspicuous number of cameras for, it's like somebody knows something is going to happen and they want to have a maximum number of cameras on it. Like, why would you have 16 camera angles if there isn't something going to happen? No, you'd only have like a couple good ones, like maybe like 3 or 4. Why would you jump out of a plane in an emergency with a selfie stick and a camera running? Oh, I've had an accident, an incident. My engine has failed. My plane is going down. Instead of using this time to properly, handle the emergency, let me get my camera and screw it onto my selfie stick and start the camera and jump out of the plane. What? And then parachute. I love that one. Who wears a parachute unless you know the plane's going to crash? Like, yeah, you might have a parachute. You lose power, you have a moment to put your parachute on, but he was wearing it. Like, why would he be wearing a parachute unless he knew the plane was going to crash? So yeah, what kind of a idiot would throw away his pilot's license? He threw away his pilot's license. He threw away whatever career he's going to have. He probably was doing okay. I mean, he's an Olympian, right? Like, this is Trevor Jacobs, the Olympian. Trevor Jacob, a snowboarder and YouTuber, YouTube investigations. Yeah, this is the guy. Like, Trevor Jacob, the Olympic snowboarder, represented the U.S. in snowboarding in the 2014 Winter Olympics. Wow. I don't know. Maybe, did he need the money that badly? Was the wallet company paying that much money? Why would you crash a plane for clicks, for views, for a wallet company, for a wallet sponsorship? Yeah, usually the sponsoring company will say, like, hey, this, don't do anything illegal and you indemnify us for anything that you do. So if they get in trouble, he gets to indemnify them. Yeah, so let me know what you think of that one in the comments below.